my fiancé declared. "You can't control my choices since we haven't tied the knot yet." I had booked tickets for the show she'd been mentioning for months, hoping for some quality time together, but she abandoned everything for a getaway with her crew. I'd been planning this surprise for weeks, carefully coordinating with her assistant to ensure the weekend was clear, even requesting time off from the Marine Research Station where I worked as a biologist. Jessica had been obsessing over this particular Broadway revival for months, constantly sharing clips on her Instagram stories and talking about how life-changing it would be to see it live. I thought surprising her with premium orchestra seats would be the perfect way to reconnect after months of feeling like I was competing with her phone for attention. I was excited to finally have her undivided focus for an entire weekend in the city, just the two of us experiencing something she genuinely cared about. When I presented the tickets over dinner at our Harborside condo, her reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of excitement, her face immediately shifted to something between annoyance and panic. "Oh no, Ethan, I can't do this weekend," she said, barely glancing at the tickets I'd spent $800 on. "I already committed to a wine country retreat with the Phoenixes. We're shooting content for this major campaign about authentic friendship and living your truth." The Phoenixes were her influencer crew, 5 other women who'd built their brands around lifestyle content and motivational quotes. They traveled together constantly, turning every experience into content opportunities. "But you've been talking about this show nonstop," I said, confused. "I coordinated with Maya to make sure you were free. These are the exact seats you said you wanted when we looked at the theater layout online." Jessica waved dismissively, already scrolling through her phone. "That was before Aria got us this incredible opportunity. This retreat could change everything for my platform. We're talking potential partnerships worth 6 figures if the content performs well." I stared at her, processing what I was hearing. "So you're canceling our weekend because of a work trip you didn't tell me about?" "It's not canceling, it's prioritizing my career," she said, her tone shifting from casual to defensive. "You can't control my choices since we haven't tied the knot yet. I'm still my own person. I have to think about my brand and my future, not just couple activities." The words hit me like cold water. Control her choices? I'd been trying to surprise the woman I loved with something she'd expressed genuine interest in, not control her. "Jessica, I'm not trying to control anything. I just thought you'd want to go to the show you've been excited about for months." "Well, maybe you should have asked instead of assuming," she said, standing up and heading toward our bedroom. "I need to pack. We're leaving first thing in the morning, and I still need to plan my outfits for the content calendar." I sat there watching her pack designer luggage for a trip I'd known nothing about, while expensive theater tickets lay forgotten on our dining table. She moved with practiced efficiency, selecting clothes based on their photogenic qualities rather than comfort or weather appropriateness. When she caught me watching, her expression softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "Look, I know you meant well, but this is important for my career. The Phoenixes are my business partners as much as they are my friends. You'll understand someday when you start thinking bigger about your own opportunities." That stung. My marine biology research might not generate Instagram followers, but it contributed to ocean conservation efforts that actually mattered. I'd published papers on coral reef restoration and worked with organizations protecting endangered marine species. But in Jessica's world, impact was measured in engagement rates and brand deals. As she zipped up her suitcase, I found myself really looking at the woman I'd planned to marry. When had her priorities shifted so completely toward content creation and social media metrics? When had I become something to work around rather than someone to build a life with? The theater tickets sat there like an expensive reminder that I'd been planning a future with someone who was already planning hers without me. Alone with the unused theater tickets, I began cataloging months of similar incidents where Jessica chose her content-creating friends over our relationship commitments. The silence in our condo felt deafening after Jessica's early morning departure, broken only by the distant sound of harbor waves and her absence echoing through rooms that had gradually transformed into her personal studio space. I found myself methodically reviewing our shared calendar, seeing a pattern I'd been blind to for months. Every major relationship milestone had been systematically deprioritized for Phoenix activities or brand collaborations. Our second anniversary dinner had been postponed because Arya secured last-minute tickets to some influencer gala that couldn't be missed. Jessica's absence from my parents' wedding anniversary celebration was explained away as an urgent collaboration meeting with a skincare brand. Even our engagement party had been treated more like a content opportunity than a celebration, with professional photographers Jessica hired without consulting me, turning our intimate moment with family into a staged production. I realized she'd been conditioning me to accept these cancellations as normal, framing my disappointment as unsupportive rather than legitimate hurt. The morning sun streamed through windows that had been strategically positioned for optimal lighting rather than the harbor views I'd originally loved about this place. Ring lights and camera equipment occupied corners where I used to display my marine specimens and research materials. My home office had been completely converted into her aesthetic content studio, without any discussion, my microscope pushed aside to make room for backdrop stands and product placement setups. When had I become a tenant in my own space, accommodating someone else's vision while my own interests were deemed not content-worthy? I was examining the theater tickets again when Mrs. Chin knocked on my door. She was my elderly landlord who lived in the penthouse unit above, a retired opera singer with sharp eyes and an even sharper wit. "Ethan, dear, I heard Jessica leaving quite early this morning with all that luggage," she said, carrying a tray with tea and homemade almond cookies. "Everything all right? You look like someone who's lost his compass." I explained the situation while we sat on my balcony overlooking the harbor, the same view Jessica had been using as a backdrop for authentic morning routine posts without crediting the location or asking permission. Mrs. Chin listened with the patience of someone who'd lived long enough to recognize patterns in human behavior. "You know," she said after I finished, "in my opera days, I learned the difference between a true duet and a solo performance with background accompaniment. A duet requires both voices to harmonize and support each other. What you're describing sounds like you've been relegated to background vocals in your own life." Her words crystallized something I'd been feeling but couldn't articulate. I keep telling myself I'm being supportive of her career, but she's never shown the same interest in mine. When I got published in that marine conservation journal, she barely acknowledged it. But when she gains 1,000 followers, it's a celebration worthy of champagne and Instagram stories. Mrs. Chin nodded knowingly. "Speaking of which, I need to discuss something with you. Jessica and her friends have been using our rooftop garden for photo shoots without permission. They've moved furniture around, left equipment overnight, and were quite rude to our building maintenance staff when asked to clean up after themselves. Mrs. Rodriguez from 3B mentioned they even damaged some of her plants during one of their sessions." I felt my stomach drop. I had no idea. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Chin. I'll make sure it doesn't happen again." "Oh dear boy, this isn't your fault," she said firmly. "But it does tell you something about character. How someone treats service staff and shared spaces reveals who they really are when cameras aren't rolling." She was right. I'd noticed Jessica's dismissive attitude toward restaurant servers and building staff but had rationalized it as stress from her demanding schedule. Now I wondered what other behaviors I'd been excusing in the name of being a supportive partner. Mrs. Chin set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "The question isn't whether Jessica should prioritize her career. That's her right. The question is whether she should build that career by consistently diminishing her relationship with you and disrespecting the community around her. From what I've observed, she treats your life together like a resource to be mined for content rather than a partnership to be cherished." As if summoned by our conversation, my phone buzzed with Jessica's first Instagram story from the wine retreat, a perfectly staged photo of her and the Phoenixes raising champagne glasses with the caption, "Living authentically means choosing experiences that align with your highest self #no apologies #authentic living." The irony wasn't lost on me. She was posting about authenticity while abandoning genuine experiences for manufactured content opportunities. While Jessica posted constant stories from her wine country retreat, including pointed captions about living authentically and not needing permission, I underwent my own transformation. The passive-aggressive nature of her social media posts wasn't lost on me, but instead of feeling hurt, I felt liberated. Her digital tantrum was confirmation that I'd been right to question our dynamic. I spent the weekend doing something I hadn't done in months, reclaiming my own space and interests without considering how they'd photograph or whether they were content-worthy. Mrs. Chen became my unexpected ally in this process, helping me systematically remove Jessica's content creation infrastructure from our shared spaces. We started with the living room, where 3 different ring light setups had transformed our comfortable seating area into a sterile filming studio. "Good heavens," Mrs. Chen muttered as we dismantled the elaborate lighting rig Jessica had installed above our dining table. "No wonder you haven't been able to enjoy a meal without feeling like you're on a movie set." The process was therapeutic in ways I hadn't expected. As we cleared backdrop stands and camera equipment, the apartment began to feel like home again instead of a production facility. Mrs. Chen suggested we donate Jessica's collection of aesthetic throw pillows, expensive white and beige squares chosen purely for their photogenic qualities rather than comfort, and replace them with pieces that actually served their intended purpose. The most shocking discovery came when we tackled my former home office, now Jessica's primary content creation studio. Behind her backdrop setup, we found my expensive research equipment that I'd assumed was safely stored: microscope components, water testing kits, and specimen containers that Jessica had been using as props for science-themed content. My precision pH meter was sitting next to her skincare products, apparently serving as an aesthetic element in posts about research-backed beauty. Worse, several components were damaged. Expensive microscope lenses had fingerprints and makeup residue, and my digital microscope had settings adjusted to unusable parameters. "She's been using your professional equipment as props?" Mrs. Chen asked, clearly appalled. "Without even asking permission?" I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. These weren't just expensive tools, they were essential for my actual research work. Jessica had treated my professional instruments like decorative objects, prioritizing her aesthetic over my ability to do meaningful work. "This explains why some of my recent specimens looked off under magnification," I said, carefully examining the damaged lenses. "I thought I was losing my touch, but she's been adjusting calibrations and contaminating sterile equipment for photo shoots." Mrs. Chen shook her head in disgust. "This is beyond disrespectful, dear. This is sabotage, whether intentional or not." We spent hours properly cleaning and recalibrating my equipment, and I felt a profound sense of relief as my workspace returned to functional order. The minimalist white aesthetic Jessica had imposed throughout the apartment, chosen specifically for optimal photo backgrounds rather than livability, gave way to elements that actually reflected my interests and personality. I hung my marine photography collection on walls previously reserved for Jessica's ring light reflectors, and replaced her sterile decorative objects with meaningful pieces: coral specimens, vintage nautical instruments, and books about ocean conservation. The transformation was remarkable. As evening approached, I changed all our shared streaming passwords to Authenticity Matters, a small act of rebellion that felt enormously satisfying. Jessica's constant complaints about our boring Netflix choices had resulted in queues filled entirely with reality TV shows and influencer documentaries that served as research for her content strategy. Now I could finally watch the nature documentaries and marine biology series I actually enjoyed. My phone buzzed constantly with Jessica's wine retreat updates, each post more passive-aggressive than the last. "Some people think love means limiting each other's growth," read one caption over a sunset photo. "Real partnerships celebrate individual authenticity and support dreams without conditions." The cognitive dissonance was breathtaking. She was posting about supporting dreams while having literally damaged the tools I needed to pursue mine. By Sunday evening, I felt more connected to my authentic self than I had in months. The apartment reflected my actual interests instead of Jessica's content requirements, my professional equipment was functional again, and I was free to spend time on activities that genuinely mattered to me rather than serving as an unpaid production assistant for someone else's brand. Jessica returned from her retreat with her entire Phoenix crew in tow, expecting to film a couple's reconciliation video for her channel without asking my consent. I was reviewing research data on my laptop when I heard multiple sets of heels clicking across our hardwood floors, accompanied by the distinctive sound of camera equipment being wheeled in. Jessica burst through the door with Aria, Madison, Chloe, and 2 other phoenixes I recognized from her content but had never actually met. They were all dressed in coordinated earth tones, clearly a planned aesthetic for whatever content they intended to create. Surprise! Jessica announced with the kind of performative enthusiasm that meant cameras were already rolling. I brought the girls back to document our reunion. We're calling it Love Without Limits, when partners choose growth over control. I looked up from my laptop, taking in the scene: professional cameras on tripods, portable lighting rigs, and what appeared to be a full production crew setting up in my living room without permission. Jessica seemed to expect me to play along immediately, her smile faltering slightly when I didn't respond with matching enthusiasm. "What exactly are you filming in my apartment?" I asked, closing my laptop deliberately. "Our makeup session, obviously," Jessica said, her voice taking on that edge it got when things didn't go according to her script. "I told my followers about our little disagreement over the weekend, and they're invested in our relationship journey. This content could go viral. It's authentic relationship goals material." She gestured to her crew, who were already adjusting lighting and testing camera angles. Aria's handling the main camera work, Madison's on social media live updates, and Chloe's managing the aesthetic consistency. We've got the whole story arc planned out: conflict, growth, reconciliation, stronger partnership. It's going to be incredible content. I stood up, surveying the transformation of our home into a professional film set. Ring lights blazed from every corner, camera tripods occupied strategic positions, and her friends moved through the space like they owned it, rearranging furniture to optimize filming angles. The apartment I'd spent the weekend reclaiming had been invaded and reconfigured without any consideration for my consent or comfort. "You didn't ask if I wanted to be part of your content," I said calmly. "Actually, you didn't even ask if you could bring 5 people and a film crew into our home." Jessica's perfectly contoured eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "Why would I need to ask? This is about us, and my audience is invested in our story. Besides," she gestured dismissively, "you're always saying you want to spend more time together. This is quality time with purpose." "Quality time with purpose?" I repeated, watching Madison adjust a camera to capture our conversation from multiple angles. "You mean performing our relationship for strangers on the internet?" "Don't be dramatic," Jessica snapped, her influencer mask slipping slightly. "This is my career, Ethan. My brand is built on authenticity and real relationships. My followers trust me because I share genuine moments, not because I hide behind some facade of privacy." Aria stepped forward with a wireless microphone, attempting to clip it to my shirt. "We'll need to get you mic'd up for optimal audio quality," she said with professional efficiency. "And maybe change into something more camera-friendly? That marine biology conference t-shirt isn't really on brand for the aesthetic we're going for." I stepped back, avoiding the microphone. "I'm not changing clothes for your video, and I'm definitely not getting mic'd up for a conversation I didn't agree to have." The room went silent except for the hum of equipment. Jessica's friends exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for resistance to their production plans. Madison was still live streaming, providing running commentary to viewers about authentic relationship dynamics, while pointing her phone camera at our tense interaction. "Look," Jessica said, her voice taking on the reasonable tone she used when trying to manage difficult brand partnerships, "I know the weekend was hard, but that's exactly why this content is so valuable. We can show people how real couples work through challenges. It's inspirational." "What's inspirational about turning our private relationship into public entertainment?" I asked. "Everything meaningful between us becomes content for your audience. When did you start seeing our life together as raw material for your brand instead of something sacred between 2 people who supposedly love each other?" Chloe, apparently assigned to emotional management, stepped forward with practiced sympathy. "Ethan, we totally understand your concerns, but Jessica's platform has such positive impact on young couples. You'd be contributing to something really meaningful by sharing your authentic journey." The word, authentic, had lost all meaning in this context. Nothing about this staged production felt genuine, from the coordinated outfits to the scripted talking points about growth and partnership. I realized that every intimate conversation, every private moment, every vulnerability I'd shared with Jessica had likely been filtered through the lens of potential content value. Jessica attempted to leverage our engagement, dramatically removing her ring and declaring she wouldn't marry someone who didn't support her career and creative vision. The conversation had been escalating for 20 minutes, with cameras capturing every moment of our deteriorating relationship for her audience's entertainment. When I continued refusing to participate in her scripted reconciliation video, Jessica's professional composure finally cracked completely. She stood in the center of our living room, surrounded by her crew and their equipment, and pulled off her engagement ring with theatrical precision. "You know what, Ethan?" she announced, her voice carrying the kind of dramatic weight that indicated she knew this moment would make compelling content. "Maybe we need to reconsider this whole engagement if you can't support my career and creative vision." She held the ring up to catch the light from her professional setup, making sure the cameras captured the sparkle as she set it deliberately on our coffee table. "I'm not going to marry someone who tries to sabotage my success and limits my authentic self-expression. My followers have been asking if you're holding me back, and honestly, maybe they're right." The accusation hit exactly where she intended it to, my deepest insecurity about whether I was enough for someone as ambitious and dynamic as she claimed to be. But instead of the desperate panic she'd expected, I felt something closer to relief wash over me. The ring sitting on the table looked less like a symbol of lost love and more like evidence of how completely she'd misunderstood what marriage was supposed to mean. "Support your career?" I said quietly, walking over to retrieve my laptop from where I'd set it aside when her crew arrived. "You mean like how you supported mine by using my research equipment as props and damaging expensive instruments I need for my actual work?" I opened my laptop and showed her the photos I'd taken during the weekend cleanup. Images of contaminated microscope lenses, improperly calibrated instruments, and professional equipment that had been treated like decorative objects for her science-themed content shoots. Jessica's confident expression faltered as she realized I had documentation of her violations of my professional materials. "That's completely different," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "I was trying to show appreciation for your work by incorporating it into my content. I was giving your research exposure to thousands of people who would never otherwise see it." "Exposure?" I repeated, scrolling through more photos on my laptop. "You contaminated sterile equipment and broke calibrated instruments for aesthetic purposes. You treated tools essential to marine conservation research like props in a photo shoot. How is that appreciation?" Arya stepped forward, camera still rolling, clearly recognizing good drama when she saw it. "Maybe we should focus on the relationship issues rather than getting caught up in material concerns," she suggested with practiced mediation skills. "What matters is how you two can move forward together." "The material concerns are relationship issues," I replied, not taking my eyes off Jessica. "Using someone's professional equipment without permission and damaging it shows a fundamental lack of respect. Just like filming in our home without asking, or turning our private conversations into public content, or," I paused, remembering something Mrs. Chen had told me, "or using our building's rooftop garden for commercial photo shoots without permission and being rude to the maintenance staff when asked to clean up." Jessica's face went red. "Those are all completely separate issues, and you're just trying to deflect from the real problem, which is your inability to support my growth and success." Madison looked up from her phone, where she'd been live-streaming the entire confrontation. "The comments are really engaged with this conflict," she announced to the group. "We're getting tons of questions about whether Ethan is emotionally abusive or just insecure about Jessica's success. This is definitely going viral." The casual way they discussed our relationship breakdown as content metrics made something snap inside me. I walked over to the coffee table, picked up the engagement ring Jessica had dramatically discarded, and slipped it into my pocket. "You're right," I said calmly. "We shouldn't get married. But not because I don't support your career. Because you've turned our entire relationship into performance art for strangers on the internet, and I don't want to spend my life being a character in someone else's brand narrative." Jessica stared at me, clearly not expecting me to agree with her ultimatum. "Wait, what are you doing with my ring?" "It's not your ring anymore," I replied. You threw it away on camera for content. Consider it compensation for the damaged research equipment and 3 years of funding your lifestyle while you built a brand by exploiting our private life. The Phoenix crew looked between themselves uncertainly, realizing their planned reconciliation story had taken an unexpected turn into actual breakup territory. Chloe tried to salvage the situation. Maybe you both just need some space to process your emotions and come back to this conversation when you're thinking more clearly. I'm thinking perfectly clearly, I said, heading toward our bedroom. I'm thinking I want to pack Jessica's remaining belongings so she and her production crew can find somewhere else to film their content. During a heated argument with her backup crew present, Jessica revealed that their engagement was partially motivated by the engagement content opportunities it provided for her growing platform. What happened next would have been comedy if it hadn't been so pathetic. As I began gathering Jessica's belongings from our shared bedroom, she followed me with her entire crew in tow, cameras still rolling, desperately trying to regain control of the narrative that was spiraling away from her planned script. You can't just end 3 years because of some misunderstandings about boundaries, she said, her voice taking on the pleading tone she typically reserved for sponsored content about products she didn't actually use. We built something real together, something worth fighting for. I continued folding her clothes methodically, struck by how much of her wardrobe consisted of items chosen specifically for their photogenic qualities rather than personal preference or comfort. Did we build something real? I asked, not looking up from packing. Or did you build a brand that happened to include me as a supporting character? The question seemed to catch her off guard, and in her flustered state, Jessica made the mistake of being honest with cameras rolling. Okay, fine, maybe I did think about the content opportunities when you proposed, she admitted, gesturing frantically as if she could wave away the words after saying them. Engagement content performs incredibly well on social media, and my follower growth has been amazing since we got engaged. But that doesn't mean my feelings weren't genuine. Arya lowered her camera slightly, apparently recognizing that this confession wasn't going to help Jessica's public image. Madison continued live streaming but looked increasingly uncomfortable as she read comments from viewers who were clearly not responding well to Jessica's admission. You thought about content opportunities during my proposal? I asked, finally looking up at her. When I was telling you I wanted to spend my life with you, you were calculating engagement rates? It's not that simple, Jessica said, but her voice lacked conviction. I can compartmentalize my business mind and my emotional responses. Just because I recognize the professional benefits doesn't mean I didn't genuinely want to marry you. I sat down on our bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes, and really looked at the woman I'd planned to spend my life with. Jessica, tell me about one moment, just one, from our entire relationship that you haven't shared with your followers or used for content in some way. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Jessica searched her memory, clearly struggling to identify any private moments that had remained private. Her crew exchanged glances, and I could see Madison's livestream comments becoming increasingly critical as viewers witnessed Jessica's inability to answer such a basic question about relationship intimacy. That's not fair, Jessica finally said. My whole brand is built on authenticity and transparency. My followers trust me because I share real moments from my life. Privacy isn't necessarily more meaningful than openness. Privacy isn't meaningful? I repeated. So when I told you about my father's cancer diagnosis and you posted about it the next day with affiliate links to wellness products, that was authenticity? Her face went pale. I asked if you were okay with me sharing that story. You said it might help other people going through similar situations. I said it might help people. I didn't say you could monetize my family's medical crisis with affiliate marketing, I replied, pulling out my phone to show her the screenshot I'd saved. Support your loved ones through difficult times with these amazing self-care products. Link in bio, code STRONG20 for 20% off. Jessica's crew was now openly uncomfortable, with Chloe suggesting maybe they should stop filming and give us privacy to work things out. But Jessica seemed incapable of existing without an audience anymore, as if her thoughts and feelings only became real when validated by social media engagement. The breaking point came when I discovered something that made everything else pale in comparison. While packing Jessica's desk area, I found a folder labeled Wedding Content Strategy, filled with detailed plans for monetizing our wedding ceremony. The documents revealed partnerships with vendors, sponsorship deals with brands, and a comprehensive social media campaign designed around our marriage. There were seating charts organized for optimal photography angles, vendor contracts that included social media requirements, and even scripts for wedding party members to ensure consistent brand messaging throughout the ceremony. You were planning to live stream our wedding? I asked, holding up the documents. With sponsored content and affiliate marketing integrated into the ceremony itself? Jessica grabbed for the papers, but I held them out of reach. Those are just preliminary ideas. I was going to discuss everything with you once we got closer to the wedding date. Lots of influencers monetize their weddings. It's a smart business strategy that helps offset costs. You have a script here for my vows, I continued, flipping through pages. You wrote my wedding vows to include product placements and maintain brand consistency with your image. You turned our marriage into a marketing campaign before we even set a date. The Phoenix crew finally stopped filming, apparently recognizing that this revelation crossed a line even for their content-hungry standards. Aria began packing up camera equipment while Madison ended her livestream, both looking genuinely embarrassed to have witnessed the depth of Jessica's commodification of our relationship. Ethan, please, Jessica said, tears streaming down her face, and for the first time in months, they looked completely genuine rather than performative. I know how this looks, but I love you. I got caught up in the business side because I wanted to build something bigger for us, for our future together. I wanted to create financial security through my platform. By treating our wedding like a sponsored event and our marriage like a business partnership? I asked, gathering the documents as evidence of just how completely she'd lost perspective on what relationships were supposed to mean. These aren't plans for a marriage, Jessica. They're plans for a very expensive commercial featuring two people who used to love each other. I officially ended our engagement, keeping the ring as compensation for the damaged research equipment and unauthorized use of my intellectual property in her content. The Phoenix crew packed their equipment in uncomfortable silence while Jessica made increasingly desperate attempts to salvage both our relationship and her brand narrative. Her final plea came as I held the door open, waiting for them to leave. Ethan, please don't do this. We can work through anything if we just communicate better and find compromises that work for both of us. But I was done compromising my values and privacy for someone who saw our life together as raw material for content creation. The compromise was supposed to be temporary, I replied. You asked me to be patient while you built your platform, and I supported that. But you never intended to scale back. You planned to escalate our entire marriage into a multimedia brand experience. Mrs. Chen appeared in the hallway as Jessica's crew wheeled their equipment toward the elevator, offering Jessica a polite but cold nod that spoke volumes about how thoroughly she'd burned bridges in our building community. Within days, Jessica's attempts to control the breakup narrative backfired spectacularly when her own content revealed the truth about her manipulative behavior. Her live-streamed confession about engagement content and the leaked wedding monetization documents made it impossible for her to paint me as controlling or unsupportive. Comments on her posts shifted from sympathy to criticism as her followers realized how completely she'd commodified what should have been private relationship milestones. Brands began quietly distancing themselves from partnerships with someone who'd been exposed as prioritizing profit over genuine human connection. Mrs. Chen helped me transform the apartment into a proper research space again, and I adopted a rescue sea turtle named Navigator from a local aquarium that needed to rehome him due to space constraints. Navigator had been injured by boat propellers and required specialized care, but his resilience reminded me daily that recovery was possible after trauma. My home office became functional again, filled with properly maintained equipment and specimens that served actual scientific purposes rather than aesthetic ones. I started posting on social media again, but this time showcasing my genuine passion for marine conservation rather than performing a relationship for public consumption. My content attracted a meaningful following of fellow scientists, ocean advocates, and people interested in environmental protection, audiences who valued substance over manufactured drama. The research I'd been struggling to complete while my equipment was contaminated and my workspace was compromised suddenly progressed rapidly. I published 2 papers on coral reef restoration and was invited to speak at a marine biology conference, achievements that felt infinitely more meaningful than any viral social media moment. My dating life improved dramatically when I met Dr. Sarah Martinez, a fellow marine biologist who shared my passion for ocean conservation and respected the boundary between public professional work and private personal relationships. She found Jessica's behavior as appalling as I had, but more importantly, she demonstrated daily how partnerships were supposed to function, with mutual respect, shared goals, and genuine support for each other's individual growth. The story concluded with me finding peace in my authentic life while Jessica's influence empire crumbled as sponsors distanced themselves from her relationship exploitation controversy. She moved back to her hometown after her follower count plummeted and major brand partnerships were terminated following the public relations disaster of her live-streamed breakup and revealed wedding monetization schemes. The Phoenixes disbanded as individual members pursued their own careers, leaving Jessica without her support network of fellow content creators who had enabled and encouraged her boundary-crossing behavior. I occasionally heard updates through mutual acquaintances. Jessica had taken a job at a traditional marketing firm and was slowly rebuilding her life away from social media influence culture. I genuinely hoped she would find happiness and learn healthier relationship patterns, but I was grateful our paths would never cross again. My life had become everything I'd wanted it to be before getting caught up in someone else's performance of what life should look like. Navigator thrived in his rehabilitation tank, eventually healthy enough for release back into the ocean, a process I documented not for content, but because witnessing his return to freedom felt symbolic of my own journey back to authenticity. The unused theater tickets still sat framed on my desk, not as a reminder of disappointment, but as evidence that sometimes the best surprises come from plans that fall apart, leading you towards something infinitely better than what you originally thought you wanted.